It's strange how memory works. You can live an entire lifetime, raise children, bury loved ones, move across cities, and still, one face, one sound, one heartbeat stays lodged in your chest like it never left. For me, that memory is a baby's cry, my baby's cry. It was 1965 when I lost her. I was only 19, foolishly in love, scared, and certain that love could fix everything. His name was Robert, a factory worker with oil on his hands and dreams too big for the small town we lived in. He used to walk me home every evening after my shift at the bakery. He'd bring me daisies, always daisies, because he said they looked like me when I smiled. We were young, but our hearts didn't know the meaning of too soon. When I found out I was expecting, I thought the world would stop and smile with me, but it didn't. My father was a stern man, the kind who believed reputation mattered more than truth. When he found out, his face turned red with shame and rage. "You've ruined us, Lima," he shouted, his voice echoing through our small house. My mother cried quietly in the corner, but no one touched me, no one comforted me. Robert promised to marry me, but when the factory laid him off, he disappeared, said he'd return once he found work in another city. He never did. His last letter said, "Wait for me." I waited for months, but time moved on and people stopped believing in promises made by poor men. When I gave birth, I was sent away, to a home for girls like me. It was a quiet, cold building by the countryside, where the nuns didn't ask questions, only prayed and scolded in equal measure. They told us our babies would have better lives with good families. They said we'd thank them later. I never did. The night my daughter was born, the rain was falling hard against the windows. I remember the sound of the storm mixing with her tiny cries. I held her for exactly 7 minutes before a nurse took her from my arms. "She'll go to a kind home," they said. I screamed. I begged. I told them I didn't care if I had to scrub floors for the rest of my life. I just wanted her. But they wouldn't let me. They said it was for her future. The next morning, they made me sign a paper I didn't understand. My hands shook so badly I could barely write my name. When I asked where she was, they said she'd already been taken. I never saw her again. I left that place with empty arms and a hole in my soul that no one could fill. For years, I tried to live like everyone else. I married a kind man later, George, who knew there was something broken in me but loved me anyway. We never had children of our own. I told him I couldn't. Truth was, I was too afraid to love something that could be taken away again. I built a life, a quiet one. I cooked, sewed, volunteered, smiled at neighbors. But at night, when the world went still, I'd hear it again, that baby's cry. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the wind. I'd wake up with tears on my pillow, whispering her name, a name only I knew. The world changed around me. New cities, new technology, people chasing things I didn't understand, but time never erased her. I'd walk past young mothers pushing prams and feel that same ache in my chest. I'd wonder if one of those children could be like her. Years turned into decades. I grew older, my hair silver, my hands lined like old tree roots. I learned to live with the pain, not because it faded, but because I had to survive. Then one morning, 60 years later, my great-niece Emma came to visit. She was bright, curious, full of energy, the kind of young woman I once was. She was working on a family tree project for school. "At Lima, you should take a DNA test," she said. "It helps people find relatives and see where they're from." I laughed. I'm too old to spit in a tube for science. But she insisted, smiling. "It's fun. Who knows? You might find cousins in Scotland or something." I didn't tell her that the only person I'd ever wanted to find was my daughter. Still, a few weeks later, I gave in. She brought the little kit, helped me follow the steps, and sent it off. I forgot about it almost immediately. After all, what could it possibly show that life hadn't already taken? But fate has a strange way of finding you, even after 60 years. 3 months later, I received an email from the testing company. You have a close DNA match, 99.2%, possible immediate family. I froze. My heart pounded like it hadn't in decades. My hands shook as I clicked the message open. The name that appeared on the screen made me drop my tea. Sarah Miller, possible daughter. I stared at it, breathless. My mind raced, my vision blurred. Could it be? After all these years, after all the nights I cried into my pillow, praying for a miracle? For a moment, I felt 19 again, scared, trembling, and full of hope. The past I thought I had buried was knocking at my door again, and I didn't know whether to run or to open it. I didn't sleep that night. The glow from my computer screen haunted me. That one name, Sarah Miller, pulsing softly like a heartbeat on the screen. Possible daughter. 2 words that felt like a miracle, and a wound reopening at the same time. I stared at her profile picture for hours. A woman in her late 50s, standing by a garden full of sunflowers, smiling softly at the camera. There was something in her face, the curve of her mouth, the angle of her chin, that pulled at something deep inside me. Was it her? Could it truly be her? I scrolled down her page with trembling fingers. She lived in Seattle. She worked as a librarian. Married, 2 grown children. There was a kindness in her eyes. Calm, steady, familiar in a way that broke me. I thought of the baby I held for 7 minutes in that cold room 60 years ago. Could this be the woman she became? I wanted to write to her, but what could I say? Hello, I think I'm your mother. The thought made me laugh and cry all at once. For 3 days, I did nothing. I watered my plants, fed the cat, attended my church circle, but I wasn't there. My heart was somewhere else entirely, tangled between hope and terror. Then, on the 4th morning, I opened my laptop and saw a message notification. From Sarah Miller. Subject, I think we should talk. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked it open, my hands shaking. Hello, Lima. I took a DNA test recently, and it seems we're a very close match. I wasn't sure how to reach out. This feels surreal. But if it's true, if you really are who I think you might be, then I have 1,000 questions. Would you be willing to talk? Sarah. I sat still for a long moment, tears filling my eyes. It was polite, cautious, almost shy. And yet, beneath those few words, I could feel the same ache, the same cautious hope. I replied slowly, typing each word as though my heart were guiding my hands. Dear Sarah, yes, I took the test too. And when I saw your name, my world stopped. I don't know where to begin, but if you're willing, I'd like to talk. I've waited 60 years to tell you how much I've loved you every single day. Lima. I hit send. For hours, I sat in silence, staring at the screen, waiting for a reply. Every second felt heavier than the last. I brewed tea, read half a book without understanding a word. Then finally, the notification appeared. Can we video call? I almost said no. My heart was pounding too fast, my palms slick with sweat. I hadn't cried in years. But that night I did. I wept like a child before picking up my courage and whispering, yes. The call connected. And then, there she was. Sarah. Her face filled the screen. Kind, lined, mature, yet familiar in a way that my soul trembled. Her hair was silver at the edges, her eyes soft and uncertain. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared, both caught between disbelief and wonder. Finally, she whispered, You look like me." I laughed through my tears. "No, darling, you look like me." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd both lost and everything we were about to reclaim. She told me about her life, how she'd been adopted by a couple who couldn't have children, how they loved her dearly, how her mother, before passing, confessed that she'd been adopted as a newborn from a convent. "I never knew who you were," she said softly. "I thought about searching, but I didn't know where to begin." I listened, tears streaming down my face. "I never stopped looking for you," I said. "Not for a single day." She smiled faintly. "You named me?" "Yes. I called you Anna, after my grandmother." Her eyes glistened. "My adoptive mother's name was Anna." We both froze, stunned by the strange mercy of fate. For the next 2 hours we talked, about everything and nothing. She told me about her life, her children, her husband, her garden. I told her about my life, my quiet years, my loneliness, my small joys. She asked about her father. I told her the truth about the love that began everything and the heartbreak that took him away. When the call ended, she said softly, "Can I see you in person?" I couldn't speak for a moment, my throat closing up. "Yes," I whispered finally. "Please." We chose a date. 2 weeks from then. She would fly to me. Those 14 days were the longest of my life. I cleaned every corner of the house, baked her favorite pastries, even though I didn't know what they were, and picked up the softest shawl to wear. I hadn't felt that kind of nervous excitement since I was a girl waiting for her first dance. When the day finally came, I stood by the window, hands trembling, heart thundering. A taxi pulled up outside. The door opened, and there she was. Not on a screen this time, but standing right there, in front of me. For a heartbeat, time stopped. 60 years, vanished like mist. "Sarah," I whispered. "Mama," she said, her voice breaking. And then she ran into my arms. We held each other and cried, deep, shaking sobs that carried 60 years of silence, loss, and love. The neighbors said they'd never see me cry like that. But it wasn't sadness. It was release. The ache that had lived in my chest for 60 decades finally melted away in that single embrace. That night, when we sat by the fire, she held my wrinkled hand and said, "You waited for me." I smiled through tears. I never stopped. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like a lullaby. And for the first time in 60 years, I slept without hearing a baby's cry.
The morning after Sarah arrived, I woke up to the smell of coffee. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. No one had made coffee in my kitchen but me for years. But when I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, humming softly, stirring sugar into 2 mugs. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mama." That one word, Mama, still felt unreal. It was a sound I had prayed for in the quiet of my nights, whispered to the stars, and here it was, alive and warm in my kitchen. "I didn't know how you like your coffee," she said, handing me a cup. "Sweet," I replied, "like today feels." She laughed, and it was my laugh. That same half-suppressed chuckle I had always had when trying to hide my joy. Seeing that reflection in her made my heart ache with love. We sat together at the small wooden table, steam curling up from our cups. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of everything we wanted to say but didn't know how to. Finally, she said softly, "I've imagined this so many times, but none of those imaginations felt real like this." I nodded. Neither did my prayers, but I said them anyway. That day we talked for hours about her childhood, her adoptive parents, her college days, her children. I listened to every word like a thirsty soul drinking rain. Her husband's name was Tom, a kind man, she said, quiet and gentle. They had 2 children, Emma and Luke. She showed me pictures. Emma's expecting her first baby, she said with a soft smile. That will make you a great-grandmother. The word made me laugh and cry at the same time. A great-grandmother. Imagine that. Life really does come full circle. But beneath the laughter, I could see something in Sarah's eyes, a question she was afraid to ask. Finally, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the living room, she said quietly, "Can you tell me what happened? Why did you have to give me away?" The question hung in the air like a weight. I had rehearsed that story in my mind 1,000 times, but telling it to her face, seeing those eyes that mirrored mine, it broke me. I was 17, I began, my voice trembling. Your father, Daniel, was 20. We were young and foolish, but we loved each other more than anything. He worked at a factory, I helped my mother at her bakery. When I found out I was expecting you, we thought we could manage. I paused, staring into the cup in my hands. But then, he died in an accident. I was left alone. My parents were strict, ashamed. They sent me away to a convent in another town to hide the pregnancy. I wasn't allowed to write or speak or even hold you for more than a few minutes after you were born. Tears ran down my face. They said it was for the best, that a family would give you everything I couldn't. They took you, and I never saw you again. Sarah's eyes were glistening. She reached out and held my hand tightly. You were just a girl, she whispered. You didn't abandon me. I tried to find you, I said through tears, but the records were sealed. I wrote letters, visited the convent every year. They said the adoption was closed and that you were safe. That was all I was allowed to know. We sat there in silence, our hands still locked. The only sound was the soft ticking of the old wall clock, the same clock that had measured every lonely year I lived without her. I grew up thinking I wasn't wanted, she said softly. I looked at her, horrified. Oh no, my darling, you were wanted more than anything in this world. She cried then, and I pulled her into my arms. We cried together for the years we'd lost, for the lies we'd been told, for the love that time couldn't erase. Later that night, we sat by the fire again. Sarah pulled out a small photo, an old, worn black and white picture of a young man standing beside a motorbike. Is this him? She asked. I gasped. Where did you get this? She said, it was in a box of my adoption papers. I've had it all my life, but never knew who he was. My fingers trembled as I traced his face. Yes, that's Daniel, your father. She smiled softly. I can see him in you, and in me. Then she said something that made me stop breathing for a moment. I want to find out more about him, she whispered, about the man who loved you, who's part of me. My heart tightened. I hadn't spoken Daniel's name aloud in decades. His memory was something sacred, buried deep in my chest like a locked box. But as I looked into Sarah's hopeful eyes, I knew it was time. I'll tell you everything I remember, I said. And I did. We stayed up late that night, talking until the fire burned low. By the time we finally went to bed, something had shifted. The distance of 60 years felt smaller. The pain was still there, but so was peace. Before she went to her room, Sarah turned back to me and said, I used to feel like a puzzle with a missing piece, but tonight, I think I've found it. I smiled, tears glistening again. So did I, my love. When I lay down that night, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. For 60 years, I had lived a half life. But now, with her back in it, I felt whole again. What I didn't know was that our story wasn't finished, because Sarah's search for her father would open doors I thought were long closed, and bring back ghosts I had buried long ago.
It was early morning when I heard Sarah on the phone in the next room. Her voice was soft but trembling. When she came out, her eyes were wide, not with fear, but something deeper. "Mama," she said quietly, "I've found something." She handed me a letter, yellowed and delicate with time. "It was among the adoption records," she explained. "A nurse kept it all these years. It was addressed to me. From you." My breath caught. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The papers smelled faintly of old ink and lavender, the perfume I used to wear when I was 17. "To my dearest little girl," the letter began. "I don't know your name, and I may never see your face again, but I want you to know you were born out of love. They say it's better for you this way, but I will never stop looking for you. You are the light of my soul. One day, when the world is kinder, I hope you'll find me. Love, your mother." My tears fell onto the page, blurring the words I had written 6 decades ago. "I wrote that before they took you. I begged them to give it to you." Sarah held me tightly. "They didn't, but it found me anyway." That afternoon, we visited the small town where I had grown up, where everything had begun and ended for me. The bakery where I worked was gone, replaced by a row of glass buildings, but the church still stood. I hadn't been there in 60 years. When we walked through the gates, my legs felt weak. Every step was heavy with memory, the cold floors, the echo of nuns' footsteps, the sound of my newborn crying. We stopped at the small garden behind the church. I knelt by the stone bench where I'd once sat, holding you, just for a minute, before they took you away. I used to dream of coming here with you one day, and now here you are. Sarah knelt beside me, holding my hand. "You didn't lose me, Mama," she said. "You just had to wait for me to find my way back." Over the next few months, we built a rhythm. Calls every morning, visits on weekends, long talks that stretched into the night. I met her husband, her children, her granddaughter. They welcomed me with warmth that melted every frozen part of my heart. One evening, Sarah brought me a little box. Inside was a bracelet, gold, simple, with 2 charms, a heart and a key. "The heart is mine," she said, fastening it on my wrist, "and the key is yours. You kept it safe for me all these years." I smiled, tears glistening in my eyes. "Then it's time to unlock all the days we lost." As the seasons passed, I began to write again, not letters to a lost child, but stories for her children, and for every mother who had ever been forced to say goodbye. Sometimes Sarah would sit beside me, her head resting on my shoulder as I read aloud. One night, she asked, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I thought about it, about the pain, the years, the loneliness, and then I smiled. If they had been, maybe we wouldn't be here like this. Maybe we needed time to learn how to find each other. She squeezed my hand. Then I guess life has its own way of keeping promises. Now, as I sit by the window watching the sunset, I see her car pulling up, her children spilling out, laughter echoing through the garden. It took 60 years, but my world is full again, not with riches or possessions, but with love returned. I whispered to the wind, I lost her once, but I'll never lose her again. And for the first time in my long life, I feel complete.